Welcome, 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 folks. And as usual, as you are arriving, I have also invited someone from the more than just human world to join us today, and wondering if any of you can identify who this is. Any thoughts? Perhaps a very hungry cat? That is a jaguar. So hoping that the jaguar is coming in today because I'm going to be talking about them in a few minutes. So again, we're trying to presence the more than just human world in everything that we do around here. Welcome to the Compassion Consortium Sunday service. I'm Rev Sarah Bowen today, and I'm joined today with co-founders Reverend William Melton and Victoria Moran, who we'll be hearing from today in our Compassion in Action segment. They are working on a very exciting new endeavor, and they will be sharing a little bit about that with you. Our service is also brought to you through the help of a lot of other crucial members of our team. Phil and Elaine and Jen are here with us today. And to ensure we don't have unwanted, disruptive guests, we've turned off most of the Zoom sharing functions. So if you're looking for something, that's why. We meet on the third Sunday of each month. If you're new to us, welcome. We are an interfaith, interspiritual, and interspecies community. Interfaith means we welcome people of any religion or spiritual path or system of meaning making or philosophical tradition, and we feature a diverse range of those in our programming. Today, we'll be talking with Saurabh Dalal of the Jain community. Interspiritual means that we believe underneath all of the world's religions and spiritual paths and philosophies of living, we can find some commonalities if we look hard enough, particularly the shared values of peace, of a desire to be of compassionate service, and a love for the earth community. And since we are interspecies around here, when we say earth community, we include jaguars and Jack Russells and Jack Rabbits and the Japanese bantam chicken, who I just discovered this morning when looking up animals whose names start with J. Today, I'd be remiss not to mention a whole bunch of religious holidays because we are an interfaith community. Our Muslim friends are deep in Ramadan, as our Christian folks are celebrating Lent. The Sikh New Year was celebrated on Thursday, and yesterday Zoroastrians began a 5-day festival celebrating the creation of human beings and at the same time recalling ones who have passed. Of course, today is St. Patrick's feast day. Wednesday is a gaggle of holy days, all centered around the spring equinox. I counted 14 on my multi-religious calendar. There are probably more. But the calendar event I'd really like to zoom in on today is World Wildlife Day, which technically occurred on March 3rd, but I've extended it to World Wildlife Month. This year's theme is Connecting People and Planet, exploring digital innovation in wildlife conservation. So how can we use technology and digital solutions to protect and conserve wildlife and this thing we call nature? Sometimes nature and technology are considered diametrically opposed, and yet they're not. So I'd like to first take you to South America, to the land of the Quechua and the Moche peoples, of the Guaranis and the Quichuas, who have coexisted with jaguars for millennia, despite colonization, industrialization, capitalism, eroding some of their connections to these animal persons who they share habitats with. Phil, could you bring up the picture of the beloved jaguar? I am fascinated by jaguars, whose spots are as individually unique as our fingerprints are. Unlike other big cats and the little cats many of us live with, they never purr. They only roar. And you heard a little of that roar as we got started today. And unlike the cats I live with, or some of you may live with, jaguars are actually superior swimmers. They're able to cross rivers and even plunge deep into lakes. They once roamed around 18 countries, from Mexico to Argentina. But, as you can probably guess, they've lost 50% of their historic range and are now classified as near threatened on the IUCN Red List. But luckily, an organization called Panthera has helped develop the Jaguar Corridor Initiative to reconnect patches of their fragmented habitat, kind of like that bridge is doing in LA that we talked about last year around this time for P22 and his folks. Phil, if you could go to the second slide. If you guys look at this slide, you'll notice on the left-hand side the corridor, which shows the fragmented habitat that's being reconnected. If you look in the middle, you'll see the broadleaf forests, which are being deforested not only for animal agriculture, but also for what you see on the right-hand side, coffee plantations. So like many predators who've been forced out of their habitats due to the development of cities and all of these other things that we do, including well-meaning ecotourism, jaguars are increasingly in trouble with humans. And sometimes they nab a cow or other farmed animal because they have difficulty finding their own native normal prey. And as you might expect, this causes shotguns to appear and other heartbreaking interventions, as innocent jaguars are killed as kind of insurance so that they won't do future infringements upon animals that humans are holding captive. But there's a very intriguing initiative going on to tackle this issue. What some scientists have done is place trail cams in those areas, and they are paying the farmers for letting them take photos of the jaguars to try to track where they are and help create better interventions that don't require shooting them. Technology to conserve wildlife. And now let's spin the globe. Phil, if you could go to the next slide, to South Africa, where a religious community is using digital innovation there to help another set of big cats, leopards. The African Congregational Church, which has 1 million members, has traditionally used leopard skin hats as part of their long heritage within their culture, where humans wear animal skins to take on the attributes of animals during their worship. The modern ACC partnered with Panthera, again, in an endeavor that they call Furs for Life, which worked with digital designers to create what they call hyper-realistic leopard skin patterns, which duplicate nature. So not graphic designs, but hyper-realistic leopard skin patterns that can be used instead for the hats and the other clothing items instead of using leopard skin. Phil, could you show the last slide for me? Panthera provided 20 sewing machines, tables, equipment, and 280 hours of training to 20 women from this local church. It saves significant leopard lives and at the same time is bringing economic benefits to these local women who are sewing the hats, who are often income dependent on the illegal wildlife trade. The president of the AAC reflected that this new innovation, quote, allows us to keep our tradition and the beauty of leopard skins, all the while saving the leopards that God created. Now, I know that the wearing of faux animal patterns or fake fur can be a very controversial topic that might have felt prickly for some of you. It is controversial within animal advocate communities and the animal activist movement. And so I ask us to ponder this project for a moment today, considering the intertwining of religion, indigenous cultures, technology, and the lives of wild animals. At least in this case, this seems like a win-win-win solution for all involved to me. The humans, the divine, and big cats alike. So for today's intention as I wrap, I'm going to offer this. This month, may we become more aware of wild animals around us in our own habitats, considering where technology might help conserve their lives. Over to you, William.
Okay, now I'm here. So this is the point where we read our tenets of agreement. And as I've said before, this is a very, very important part of the Compassion Consortium. So we always ask somebody to read the tenets. There's somebody hopefully different every week. And this week, we are very happy to have Carlos Garcia join us to read our tenets. He is a vegan activist and musician who spent much of his life in Hawaii. And he's about to make a temporary move from Northern California back to his native New York City. And he's going to work as a pre-production coordinator for the vegan feature film in development, Liberty, which you'll learn all about today. So I'm going to turn this over to Phil and Carlos for you to read our tenets of agreement.
Thank you, William. Hello, everyone. Our tenets of agreement. We acknowledge a divine force at the heart of the universe and in all living beings. We may refer to this force as God, but it's known by many names and appears in different forms or as formless. We recognize the common moral principles inherent within all wisdom traditions. We affirm that compassion, reverence for life, and nonviolence are fundamental to religious faith and moral philosophy and are to be extended to all sentient beings. We stand by the principles of inclusion, diversity, and equality and hold these as essential in our human relations. We hold that non-human animals are imbued with the same essence of life and love as our human animals, and that there is moral parity between us. We avow that humans do not own the earth, its resources, or its inhabitants, but instead must be involved in their protection and care. We endeavor to eat and live in a kind and sustainable manner, moving away from animal foods and animal-derived clothing, as well as any activities that cause harm to our fellow beings, human or otherwise. We aim to provide spiritual comfort, fellowship, and food for thought to those practicing or exploring a vegan lifestyle. We commit to sharing these principles freely with humility and respect in support of non-human animals and the earth.
And so those tenets underlie everything that we do here, including trying to do some spiritual practices to try to connect us more deeply to animals in the more than just human world. In addition to considering cats this month, I've been inspired by the work of Ted Krause, who's the author of The Great Animal Orchestra. Has anyone read this book? It's absolutely fascinating. He's a soundscape ecologist who for over 45 years has been recording wild soundscapes, which are then used to understand the health of a habitat. Because sometimes a habitat looks like it's okay, but when you listen to a soundscape, you find that many of the species who once lived there before human activity have actually left. So being able to hear what's going on in a habitat is part of conservation. And he identifies 3 layers to the soundscape. The first is called geophony, which is the abiotic part of the world, right? Or what we hear, wind, water. The second is the biophony. Well, that's animal sounds and the sounds that come out of us. And the third is anthrophony. And I think we probably know what that means because considering it starts with anthro, that's the sound we make that don't come out of our body through the abiotic elements. For example, if anyone ever saw the documentary Sonic Sea, when we go down and we do sonic booms in the ocean to look for oil, and we cause a lot of damage to marine mammals and to fish, well, that's anthrophony. That's the sound that we make that's human created. And so I've been thinking about this abiotic kind of piece of the world that we don't always talk about in animal circles, about the wind and the water and the mountains. And I am really excited that one of our animal chaplaincy training cohort members created a practice for us recently that was based on the wind. The wind is crucial to the health of habitats and animals and to us. It helps seeds disperse, right? It can also be a destructive force that brings trees down on our homes or whirls up tornadoes, and off goes Dorothy and poor Toto. So, like everything, we find that there are pleasant and destructive attributes to every abiotic and biotic member of this world. So I'm going to introduce Tina Miller. And Phil, if you could bring up Tina Miller for me, and I'll tell you just a little bit about her, and then she can tell you what inspired this practice using the wind. And then Phil will roll the practice so that we can give it a try. Tina Miller is an animal welfare professional in a shelter setting. She lives with 2 dogs, 2 cats, a betta fish, and a snail. This practice was created as a way to calm her after work thoughts that like to creep in right before bed. And if any of you know shelter workers, you know that many of those after work thoughts can be very, very difficult based on the work that they are doing. Hello, Tina. So could you tell
Hi.
us a little bit about Be the Wind and kind of why you developed this practice, or a little more about those after work thoughts?
Yeah, this practice was a way for me to just calm my mind when I was trying to go to sleep, trying to rest when I couldn't. And this is really what developed after really years of me trying to find a way to make that work for me. And it does help me. Typically after I do it, I will fall right asleep because I have experienced some sort of peace.
I love it. Well, I felt the same way after doing the practice. And so thank you for allowing us to share it here. When you created it, it wasn't for a large audience, but you have gratefully and graciously allowed us to use it this way. So Phil, if you could bring up the Be the Wind practice, and let's see if folks can try this and maybe take it with them into their month if they're having a hard time after work or for falling asleep or feeling stressed.
Hey everybody, today we're going to practice becoming the wind. Find a comfortable, quiet space. If you'd like, you can close your eyes. Imagine a field of long grass, the blades thick and green, dotted with wildflowers. Imagine the creatures who might live in the field. Horses, rabbits, birds. There's a pond nearby, filled with fish and frogs, the surface dotted with lily pads. There's an oak tree, home to a family of squirrels. Now imagine your breath is the wind, and your breath affects the entire ecosystem of this field. Inhale. Imagine your breath is the wind, swaying the grass towards you. Exhale. Imagine the grass is now bending away from you. Inhale. See the ripples in the pond. Exhale. See the lily pads float away from you. Bring your attention now to the herd of relaxed wild horses. Focus on one of them. Inhale. Your breath dances through the hair in their tail. Exhale. Your breath bends the grass around their hooves. Inhale. They look up. Exhale. Your breath moves their hair out of their face. And let's just breathe a few more times, focusing on how your breath affects change. Your breath is moving the wildflowers. Your breath tickles the tail of a squirrel in the oak tree. Hear the rustle of the leaves. Begin to draw back into your body. Notice you're floating away from the horses, away from the pond, away from the tree, and away from the peaceful field. As you begin to come back, notice how you feel. Bring your attention to your body and breath. Inhale, wiggle your toes. Exhale, move your fingers. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Thank you for participating in this practice with me. Remember, you can become the wind anytime, any place. You can go anywhere you'd like and be with any creatures you can imagine. The wind affects us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. I am going to be being the wind with jaguars and leopards all night, so I appreciate that. This practice was under 2 minutes, folks. If you felt something from that, highly recommend trying it again. And if you need the video, remember on our YouTube channel at Compassion Consortium, you'll be able to try the practice again. Tina, thank you so much. And I pass it on over to Victoria now.
Okay, hi everybody. Such a pleasure to see you all here today. And I know I'm not able to see a lot of people on camera, but that means I'm seeing your soul through your name. So speaking of soulful, our guest today is somebody that I have absolutely adored for a really long time. I don't know, 20 years, something like that. Our paths have crossed, and he is Saurabh Dalal, and he is a member of probably the most Ahimsa based faith community on earth. We'll ask and see if he agrees with that. As a Jain, he is also an engineering consultant and physicist who's passionate about promoting a vegan lifestyle, and a lifelong vegetarian, vegan since 1991. Saurabh is a board member of all kinds of organizations doing good in the world, and he is a volunteer for others and an avid ethical investor. Welcome, Saurabh Dalal.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Thank you for having me. And yeah, great to be a part of this.
Well, it's wonderful to have you. You are our second Jain. We did have Dr. Tushar Mehta a year or so ago. And if anybody likes to go in the website or our YouTube channel and look in archives for things that you weren't part of because you didn't know about us then, we invite you to do that. So, Saurabh, the thing that I want to start with is kind of picking up on something that Sarah mentioned in her sermonish when she said that very often we think of nature and technology as being opposed. And very often, too, we think of science and scientists as opposed to religious traditions. But you are a scientist and you are a Jain. So tell us how that works.
Well, I don't think there's conflict, and I think being rooted in the principles of Jainism has helped me at least. And so, I mean, I find it fascinating. I find it challenging to be involved in, various parts of work that I do. But I think the backdrop that I was raised with, thanks to my parents and the community, kind of puts things in perspective. So I think we can pursue, kind of understanding the universe, understanding various things better, as long as we kind of have the right, framework to put it in perspective.
Cool. Well, you seem to put a lot of things in beautiful perspective. You have such a lovely way of being able to be a spiritual person in the material world, and it just seems to be seamless for you. I know that you're a great entertainer and you put together wonderful social events for people. So we mentioned before that word ahimsa, and I think probably just about everybody here knows that word, but for those who don't, I invite you to explain it, and also about the role that it plays in the Jain tradition.
Sure. Okay. Well, ahimsa is loosely translated as non-injury or non-violence. And in the Jain philosophy, it is the first and foremost of the 5 principles of Jainism. And so it is supposed to be practiced in our thoughts, in our words, and in our actions. And so it really does kind of, it's permeates every aspect of our life. And so ahimsa is kind of the basis of how we are supposed to interact in the world. And along with the other, 4 principles, which I'll just mention briefly, Satya, which is seeking and speaking and living the truth, and Asteya, which is taking only what's given to us, Aparigraha, which is detachment from material things, and Brahmacharya, which is purity of mind and body. And so these 5 principles, we call them the Panch Prats, they represent sort of the core of Jain philosophy, and ahimsa, of course, being very relevant to those of us who are involved in, say, the animal rights movement and the vegan movement, because it does, every living being is accorded respect, and it's based on that principle of ahimsa.
So those tenets that you listed for the people here who are yogis, they will recognize those as among the tenets of yoga as well. So take us back a little bit historically and help us understand where these ahimsa faiths, and I think we think of them as Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism, with probably Jainism leaning a bit more towards ahimsa than the others, again, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. So where did these principles come from? And how did they divide up? Where did Jainism come as its own particular path?
Sure. Again, I'm not a scholar, but I have read a lot about this, and it is something that's of great interest to me. So I would say that, historically, around the 6th century BCE was when we have historical figures like, say, the Buddha, Mahavira, who's kind of historically one of the significant, and the 24th of these Tirthankaras, these spiritual guides. And I think it was a time of a lot of religious ferment, and a lot of things were happening, and there were, say, animal sacrifices, there was subjugation of women, just, disregard for the planet, not unlike, sadly, what we have going on today. And I think Jainism and other religions like Buddhism arose as a reaction to a lot of the practices of the time. And so I think they gained a lot of strong followers. If I read correctly, if I remember right, I think there was 3-to-1 female to male followers of the Mahavira, and so back in the day. And so I think it really drew a lot of attention because of what was going on, and people feeling like there has to be a better way.
Now, that female to male thing is just too good to not follow up on, because probably everybody here thought when you said that, wow, that's just like in the vegan world, or in a lot of religious contexts throughout the world as well. So as you look out into the world and all of your involvement in animal rights and vegan organizations, are you kind of lonely as a guy? You're kind of one of not too many?
Well, I wouldn't say that I'm feeling alone in that sense. I think we have a lot of great people involved, and it's good to see that we do have a lot of female leaders and organizations. And so I wouldn't say I feel alone, and I feel privileged to be a part of it and to work with a lot of great people.
Well, and I'm so glad that you did bring up Mahavira, because my favorite quote in all the world is his: "To every creature, their own life is very dear." And I had heard that for years, but it really spoke to me one day when a large, and to my sensibilities, scary water bug was in a trash can. in my second New York apartment. And that quotation just did it for me, that regardless of my aesthetics, regardless of my history, regardless of what I had been schooled to think about a creature who looked like that, to him or her, their life was very dear. And that's my answer today to anybody about, why are you a vegan? Why do you do this stuff?
Yeah, no, that's true. And I would say that, the Jain religion being Ahimsa and these other principles, every living being has a soul, and each soul deserves respect and is entitled to live for its own purposes. And so, what is it that we can do to help support not only ourselves on this journey, but all other living beings? And the framework of these five principles offers people, kind of this guideline of how we can act in the world, and it being more in line with the principles, which of course means being more compassionate, more respectful, nonviolent, and really appreciating, this ecosystem, this world that we live in, and supporting it is important. So I feel like for me, these principles have helped me kind of put things in context. And whenever I have like a dilemma or a decision that I have to make, sometimes I'll look at these principles as a guiding framework to say, what should I do? What's most in line? And kind of put things in that perspective.
So someone wrote to me when they found out that you were going to be our guest and asked if I would ask you about Jainism and karma. And they said that they think Jainism has karma more delineated than anybody else, but they don't really understand it. So can you, and I know you said you're not a scholar, but you're Saurabh. So can you pontificate a bit on that, please?
I will give you my view. So,
Okay.
the theory of karma is very important in Jainism. And so it's the basic idea that what you do really comes back to affecting your state, your karmic state. And so everything you do, whether it's in thoughts and words or in actions, actually does come back to you. And so your future is kind of determined by the things you've done in the past and what you do today and what you will do in the future. So it's very deterministic in that sense that, everything is in your control, and what happens to you is determined by what it is that you do. So thoughts, words, and deed. And karma plays a role because all living beings have a soul, and each soul is affected by those actions. And karma is, at least from a kind of a technical point of view, it's imperceivable to the senses, but it's something that cannot be detected. And it's what binds the soul to embodied form in the universe. And the goal of Jainism is to kind of progress on this path towards spiritual enlightenment, where you remove all the karma from your body by doing penances, by doing, various deeds that help exhaust that karma to get to a state where you're eventually, over countless lives, to reach this state of moksha, which is pure energy, pure bliss, and it's an eternal state. And so by, again, practicing these principles that, are, good for yourself and for the world, you can make progress towards that path towards moksha, or we also call it nirvana. So karma plays a fundamental role, and it's what determines the cycle of birth and rebirth. That's samsara.
And I read somewhere that in the Jain view, if you're not going to devote your whole life to being a religious or spiritual person, the best thing you can do with your karma is to be vegetarian. Is that true, or was that somebody's opinion?
Well, I mean, I would agree with that. And at least from the Jain perspective, in terms of the principles, if you look at the principles and you apply them fully, I mean, really every one of those five principles points to why people should be vegan and why we should eliminate all animal products, and that exploitation and abuse and killing from our lives. And so I think it is very important for people to choose to be vegetarian and more so vegan. And I would say that all the principles, according to Jainism, really point that way. But sadly, I think a lot of people don't practice it because they still live in that world where they feel that, animals, the treatment of animals isn't as bad as it actually is. And they kind of live in like the past. And so they kind of feel like it's, oh, they're treated pretty well and all that. But now when you look at the reality, you understand that it's not like that at all. It's horrific, and we really have to change what we do. So sadly, many Jains are still lacto-vegetarian, and we're seeing this great trend of more and more Jains becoming vegan because they sort of understand that this is what goes on, and it is in line with the principles.
So I'm fascinated when you talk about that this cruelty-free, or as close as we can get to a cruelty-free way of life, uses all these principles, because for so many years I thought, okay, we want to do this, we want to do Ahimsa. But after reading Sharon Gannon's Yoga and Veganism, she took us through all these principles and what this lifestyle choice has to do with honesty and purity in the others. So can you do that for us too, beyond Ahimsa? What do these choices that we make every day have to do with the other tenets that you talked about?
Sure. I think this is something that, we're kind of promoting more and more within the Jain community and outside. And so Ahimsa is kind of, very clear how that fits in. But I'll give you an example of the principle of Brahmacharya. And Brahmacharya oftentimes is thought about as being, say, celibacy or abstinence. But when you put it in this idea of what we think, what we say, what we do, and then also what it is that we do that's also done for us and that we implicitly support. We call it Karyu, Karavyu, and Anumodan. What we do, what's done for us, and kind of what we implicitly support. And looking at Brahmacharya, what happens to animals today, right? We violate them. We violate their reproductivity. We artificially impregnate them. We force them. And this is a complete violation of even that principle of Brahmacharya, because it's not only what we do, it's what's done for us, and by supporting it implicitly. And I find that when I, given talks about this, a lot of people, especially women, it sort of resonates with them. They say, that is exactly right. And our principles have already said this. We just haven't kind of recognized it that way. So that's an example of how yet another principle that's not normally connected really is vital in our understanding and should help us, appreciate how important the principles are and how much they play a role in our lives and how they lead us to something like choosing veganism.
So just to be clear, for anybody that's like, oh my gosh, you're not saying I have to be celibate, can you talk about a little bit Brahmacharya for regular people?
Well, again, it's what we do, it's what's done for us, and it's what we support, and it's thoughts and words and deeds. And so any aspect of that, if you're in a committed relationship, then I think that's important to stay committed, to be faithful. And really, it's the focusing of your energy. And so it's about focusing your energy on what's really important. And, and so I think that's kind of the emphasis of Brahmacharya. How do you focus yourself and your energy to the things that are the best for you and for the world around you?
Well, that is so beautifully put. So some people have picked up Jain cookbooks here and there and noticed that Jains, and I don't know if this is true for you over here in America or not, you can share if it is or not, don't eat a lot of things that we think of as plant foods. So root vegetables, mushrooms, some other things Jains avoid. Tell us what those foods are and why.
Okay, so Jains, again, there's a practice and then there's sort of the philosophy. And if you look at the principles, it kind of leads you towards what should be least harmful. It's a minimization of harm. And what is it that we can do to survive and to help ourselves and those around us and the world around us with the minimization of harm. And so really it's those one-sensed organisms that is least harmful to consume. And those would be from the plant kingdom. Now, root vegetables are interesting. A lot of Jains, and we used to not eat root vegetables at home, but I would eat them when I go out. And the idea behind it is, and again, I practice Jainism in an imperfect way. And just like I do with anything, it is imperfect, but I try in ways that I think are, the most possible and realistic for me. Root vegetables, the reason why they say that there's more harm in eating a root is because you're actually killing the whole plant or good for the plant. Whereas if you take, say, an apple from a tree or a tomato off the vine, the plant still survives. So the amount of harm is much less when you eat something that grows above ground and not as a root, because you're not killing the whole plant. So you're minimizing your harm if you don't consume a root. Then there's also the idea that there's microorganisms and other, living creatures around the soil. And if you keep on removing it and disturbing the soil, you're exposing them to sunlight and you're doing more harm to those that are around it. And so that's why they say it's better to eat, say something that's not a root. Mushrooms is an interesting one because it's really not a plant. It's not from the plant kingdom. It's certainly not an animal. And so I think a lot of Jains, kind of try and focus on only plants and those that, are above ground. And also there's this idea that fungi are, grown in environments that are not as clean and all of that. So I think a lot of Jains, and myself also, I don't eat mushrooms. I don't enjoy eating mushrooms, but it's not so much an ethical thing as much as like it's just not my traditional upbringing, and culturally. Even though we know that mushrooms offer some great alternatives to animal products. So I think it still goes back to this idea of what is the principle of least harm, and how do you do the least amount of harm? And because food is something that's controllable, that we can choose what we put in our mouths, that it offers us an opportunity to practice it to a greater extent.
Do you find that Jain people in general have a greater sensitivity to other than human beings? Or is it just something like, I'm born into this, I practice it, and don't give it a lot of thought?
I would say that a lot of them do grow up, if they've grown up with in a Jain family or Jain household, that they do believe that animals have a right to live, insects included. All living beings really do. So I think there is some understanding if you've grown up in a more traditional Jain household. Certainly with me, when I was growing up, that was something that was very important. We would never kill insects or bugs. We would always try and, scoop them up and then take them outside. And so those are the types of things I think a lot of Jains do grow up with that. So I think that there is this understanding, realization. Sometimes we just live in a world that's not the world that is as it is today. And so a lot of people from our, say, the older generation, still kind of feel like, oh, animals are treated fine, and so we don't harm them by taking their milk, but they're just not really acknowledging the reality that is today. And I think the younger generation really do question things. They're seeing that, and they're seeing all of these crises that we have in the world, and how these principles can offer us, good solutions. And again, being vegan is one important one of those.
So tell us about your life, Saurabh. I know you're really involved in lots of organizations. You live in 2 different cities. You're all over everywhere. You're such a Renaissance guy. And how does your regular daily life out there in the world reflect your Ahimsa proclivities?
Yeah. I think it's about our nature, and everyone has a certain type of nature. And I think who I am and what's important to me, I'm just trying to figure out what's the best way to do that. And of course, I'm a part of the world. I like being a part of the world, and I like learning. I like doing things. And so for me, it's that balance of trying to figure out, how do I make a living, but how do I still do, what's important, and being a part of the world where, how can I do good in the things that I do? And so even in work, I work for the city of New York, and I work on the 911 system, kind of the next generation. But I meet a lot of people who I wouldn't come across in other parts of my life. And even there, I think there's this understanding that, oh, well, Saurabh's vegan. And if we go out or we do something or we have, a celebration, you have to accommodate. And then it kind of creates this opportunity to have a dialogue. And people will ask all the time. And so it's another way. And, if we have people in every discipline, in every field, in every part of life, we have this opportunity to engage and to discuss. And for me, I enjoy that. I enjoy that a lot. And so whether it's work related or some fun activities, or obviously there's activism and other things, it's just ways to kind of practice what's really important, our values that are important, and what do we do and how do we, kind of promote those and advance those. So it's a passion, just like a lot of us on this call here. And I think in every aspect of our life, we can find a way to advance it.
Oh, that's so cool. And you do it brilliantly, especially when you're throwing a party. So there are some questions over here in the chat for our last few minutes. And Eris is asking, how would one manage those who do cause harm or do violence, whether people or animals?
Well, that is a great question, and I'll give you, I guess, my perspective is, I think in some ways, as emotional and as as grave as it is, I think we have to understand that people have not always come to this in the same way that we have. And so how do we raise awareness without making people feel defensive? And so part of it is just having this kind of a conversation as rational as possible and kind of questioning something. I'll give you an example of something that happened the other day. I was in line at Van Leeuwen's, which has great vegan ice cream, obviously, if those of you know in New York City. And there was a guy who looked up and saw a vegan section of the menu, and he was criticizing. He was like, "Oh, those vegans, and you know what? I would never eat that. It's got to be awful." He was kind of, an older guy and kind of walking down the line, getting towards the back of the line. And I just kind of said to him, I said, "Oh, have you ever tried it? It tastes amazing. And I bet you if you didn't know and you did a blind taste test, you wouldn't know the difference." And he kind of paused, looked at me, and he walked away. And then he came back and said, "You know what? I tried almond milk recently. And it was actually pretty good." And so it's just like one of those things where, who knows how it works, right? And we're not going to be able to change everyone instantaneously. But all these little things that we do add up. And when it happens multiple times, time and again, I think all of this is part of that process of change. So I think we just have to be good, positive examples. And we have to kind of understand that, look, we weren't always in the same place. They're not. Maybe they haven't had the benefits that we've had in order to understand this, and that there is potential for change, and we can be a part of that. And not being angry, but really trying to maybe ask some very good, thoughtful questions is one way, at least that I found to be pretty good. And I mean, I know people can have anger and feel very emotional about it, and those are all important too. But for me, I find that kind of this thoughtful approach and really being, sometimes we're shy about doing things, but sometimes speaking up, but doing it in a way that doesn't make them feel defensive. I think it does work. And I think these things add up over time.
Cool. Now we have 2 minutes left. So this is a theology question that gets answered in a short amount of time. Elaine is asking, in Hinduism, one either has to be born into it or brought in by a guru. I am very, very drawn to Jainism. Could I convert and become a Jain?
Well, the way we look at it is that anyone can become a Jain. Many people are Jain. It's just there's no conversion process. But I think there are communities in major cities around the country, and then there's online resources. And so really anyone can, quote unquote, become Jain. And I think part of it is that if you want to be a part of a community, I think you just have to kind of find that and reach out. And there's great resources, again, online and in print and all that. So no conversion process that I know of, but I think everyone can become Jain and learn a lot from it and also contribute to the community. So I don't have a clear answer, but Elaine and anyone else, I would say if you want, please reach out to me and I'm happy to help with resources and contacts. And I think they're looking for people to bring in a lot of ideas and share their experiences so the community grows as well.
Wonderful. Well, Saurabh, thank you so much. There's one more question that we don't have time for. Hopefully you can stay for the breakout rooms, and perhaps you'll be in the same room as the person who is asking about onions and garlic and spices. So
Sure.
Maybe that's a topic for breakout rooms, onion and garlic and spices. Sounds like an Indian-Italian celebration for St. Patrick's Day. Thanks, everybody. And we'll turn it over now, I believe, to Reverend William for Song of Compassion. Is this correct?
Thank you very much. And thank you to the organizers once again.
All the best, Saurabh.
You too.
Hey, everyone, and welcome to Compassion in Action. Today, we have two people that probably need no introduction. Reverend William Melton and Victoria Moran founded, along with Reverend Sarah, founded the Compassion Consortium. And they are two people that I believe really live into action the phrase Compassion in Action. They've done so much for so many years to help animals, and now they're involved in a really exciting project that's spreading that message even more. And it's a film called Miss Liberty. It's a feature film. So to discuss that today, here we are with Reverend William and Victoria Moran. Welcome, you guys.
Hey, Elaine.
Thank you.
So, Victoria, I'd like to ask you one question. You were part of a vegan documentary called A Prayer for Compassion. That was such a cool film. And there are a lot of vegan documentaries out there, but Miss Liberty is a feature film and so much more expensive to make than a documentary. What made you take this task on?
Oh, well, sometimes I think because we're crazy. I think the direct answer is that I'm married to a guy who wasn't thinking about doing the impossible. He just set out to do it. And it was really William who wrote the first draft and came up with the idea for Miss Liberty, which is a story. And as you say, the documentaries are so terrific and they are just coming at a steady clip. They're doing so much good. We've got the Rowdy Girl documentary out now that's doing a lot. The Smell of Money, about what happens, in the areas where they raise the pigs, what happens to the humans there is a big one. We've got Christspiracy coming this week. It's going to be in 600 theaters across America and is getting a lot of play. So documentaries are wonderful and they're changing a lot of minds and hearts. But most people aren't going to see vegan or animal-centric documentaries. But people have historically gone and taken their kids to see movies that have an animal in them. And so we got a movie with an animal, but also with a really great story, a fabulous surprise ending, and we're excited.
Sounds fabulous. William, you're the creator. Where did the inspiration come from for this film?
Okay, so where was the inspiration? So, well, it's not uncommon for a cow or other animal to escape from a truck or a slaughterhouse. And we all cheer the escaped animal. And sometimes the animal is saved to a sanctuary. But after the cheering, most humans just continue doing the same thing, killing and eating other living beings. So I started with the concept and developed by the story, starting with the story of Miss Liberty. Subtitle is A Taste of Freedom. And so this was actually, believe it or not, this was in 2007 when I originally wrote the script. And so what is it now? 2024? So is that 17 years? And so I went to Farm Sanctuary in Watkins Glen, and I spent a month working on the story, writing the script, working with Jean Bauer from Farm Sanctuary. And most importantly, I got to know cows because I had never actually met a cow. So this was an opportunity, and worked on it from 2007 until now, 2024. Believe it or not, 95 drafts. That's just the process of how it works. And now, after all of these drafts and years, largely due to Victoria, because I'll be totally honest with you, I gave up. She is a force of nature and she would not give up. So here we are in a position to actually move forward with pre-production and initial funding. And maybe there will be a different ending to Miss Liberty's story, but you're going to have to wait until the movie is released and you see the ending.
I love that Victoria helped carry your vision for you when you were tired of looking at it. That's why you guys are such a great team. Victoria, who's the target audience for this film? Who will be coming to see it?
Well, that's one of the most exciting things about this film, because it's people who have never really thought about farmed animals or agriculture or making food choices for ethical reasons. So my target person, when they always tell you as a writer, you're supposed to think about one person who's going to read or watch what you're doing. And I see a single dad out in the Midwest where I'm from. He's got his kids for the weekend. And he thinks, okay, what'll we do? I guess we'll go to McDonald's and then we'll go see this movie with a cow in it. And this is the kind of person, those dads, those moms, those people looking online for something to stream. It's a great story. And we are in this wonderful heritage of cinematic stories that have changed the world. So we know that something like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, that came out when I was a teenager, and I was a kid who watched adults and kind of watched how they thought about things. And one thing I noticed was adults don't like interracial relationships. I mean, when I was a kid in the 50s and 60s, it didn't matter, if people were conservative or liberal or black or white, it's just, you just don't do that. Then this movie happened. And I know it wasn't overnight, but it just seemed to crumble that particular prejudice. And we've seen that in so many other movies that are first and foremost great stories. And then as a ripple effect, they change the world. We've seen this with animal movies as well. When Bambi came out in 1945, hunting decreased markedly and has never gone back to its pre-Bambi numbers. And that was a film designed for kids. And our film is one that kids can go to see. They'll like it. There are a couple of kids in the film. They'll relate. But there's so much that's very sophisticated and subplots that are really for adults. So I think we're going to be reaching the young generation for the future, and we're going to be reaching a lot of people for right now.
Well, I love that there's a message that's at the core of this film, incredibly important, and I identify with what you said about Bambi. But William, I have a question for you. The story is what is going to grab people. The message is great, but the story is what will grab people. Can you tell us a little bit how you develop the storyline? It's hard for people who are not. Go ahead.
I can. I mean, it's a 137-page script. But I'm going to give you a very, very short summary. So Miss Liberty is a dairy cow who escaped from a truck while being loaded into a slaughterhouse. And Bob Sanders, the main character, is a computer techie who was cheated on a contract by the slaughterhouse. And so the cow escapes and runs into her back garden. And besides, Bob decides to hold the cow as collateral until Jack Parnell, who's the owner of the slaughterhouse, agrees to pay Bob. And Bob has two young children who come to love the cow. So major character is Jack's son, who's a major character, Jack Parnell Jr., but he is universally known in the town as Jackass. And a local lawyer knows a classmate from NYU who is an internationally known animal rights lawyer, Patricia Levinson, known in the animal rights world as Cow Patty. And I guess all of you know what a cow patty is, I'm guessing. So Cow Patty decides to take on the case and defend Bob and the cow, and travels to this small town in the Midwest to fight for the cow. And then Cow Patty's ex-husband, who now works for the association, which is an unidentified cattle livestock trade organization, he shows up in town to defend Parnell's slaughterhouse and get the cow back to the slaughterhouse for processing, as they call it. Another major character is the slaughterhouse foreman, Carlos Garcia. And he is known as Shakespeare because he has a degree in English literature, but he's reduced to working in a slaughterhouse. So he tries to deal with the harsh, dangerous working conditions in the slaughterhouse and protect his workers. So as the story develops, Cow Patty describes or decides to name the cow as Miss Liberty in a nod to the Statue of Liberty, whom Cow Patty happens to pass every day on the ferry as she travels to Manhattan to her law firm. So the press latches onto this name, and Miss Liberty becomes a national cause celeb. And the story goes from there.
You know, I love how you've involved all the facets of the slaughterhouse world, including the human workers as well. And I will tell you, I'm waiting with bated breath to see this film because I keep hearing about the surprise ending, and I want to know what that is. So, Victoria, what can all of us do to become part of this film? How can we help you succeed? How can we be part of this film's success?
Well, just tell us that you're interested. And since William told you the actual given name of the Shakespeare character, I just want to share that Carlos Garcia, who read the Tenets today and who is going to be helping us out as we get going to raise the rest of the development funds, he was given the script by one of the people from Gentle World. That's an organization. We had the founder, Light, as one of our special spiritual guests here at the CC about a year ago. And she wanted Carlos to read the script because he had the same name as one of the important characters. And he fell in love with the movie, and we've been in touch for over a year. And now this isn't to scare you that you're going to have to like pick up and move and come be part of the production of the film, but that's kind of how it happens. So Carlos is going to be out here to help us, and people who are perfectly happy where they are and don't want to come and be physically part of making this movie. The first thing you can do is go to the website, which is MissLibertyTheMovie.com, and that is in the chat. Thanks, Reverend Sarah. And that gives you everything. You can also sign up for information and to be kept in touch, kept abreast of what's happening. If you are particularly interested in film, if this is exciting to you and you want to get in on being part of it, either as an investor or in some other capacity, you can just write to me, Victoria at victoriamoran.com. And we're happy to let you know what else is going on. We are planning a big party in New York City for sometime this spring. If you're in this part of the world and want to be invited, let us know. And we also have a little bit of a presence over there on X, which used to be Twitter. And there it is at Miss Liberty Film. So other ways you can keep in touch and learn what's going on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving a taste of this film. And to both of you, thank you for all you've done for animals and all you continue to do.
To you as well, Elaine.
Sarah, back to you.
So as we wrap here, we wrap with good news, and then we wrap with blessings and prayers. And so here's the good news I found for us all. Of course, there's always a lot of good news going on in the world. Sometimes we just can't see it. But someone drew my attention this week to a new web search platform available in the US. And why is that good news for animals? Well, the new search engine, which is called karmasearch.org. So Victoria, it goes right into, loops back to your interview. But karmasearch.org funds biodiversity efforts by donating 100% of its proceeds to nonprofit partners. And those are Rewild and the Humane Society. And there's good news for humans too. If you try out karmasearch.org, it doesn't permanently store search histories or resell personal data. So they didn't pay me to tell you that, but somebody drew my attention to this. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing to think about as we're thinking about technology and conservation. So that's my good news. Well, if the search engine works, once I try it out, that's my good news for the month. So as we close today, there are a lot of things that are often on our minds, and things that we bring here, events that have happened, losses that we've had, different things that we've seen in the world that have broken our heart. And this is just a time for us to offer blessings and prayers, or whatever kind of awareness or witnessing that we would like to these events that happen. So Phil, if you could first of all open the chat so that people are able to enter into there anything that they would like to have witnessed by this community of people, that would be appreciated. And then we're going to offer today just a very short practice. This is from Circle of Compassion. We've got a short video to play you. There are a bunch of folks around the world who have been doing this practice for quite some time, which is a daily blessing at noon, wherever they are, in whatever language that they speak, to increase compassion in the world. And since we're all about compassion, this felt like one that we could use today, using technology in the pursuit of better situations for animals. So Phil, if you have an opportunity to start the video, and then if people would like to offer things into the chat, we'll witness those afterwards as we close.
Along with our outer efforts to protect and liberate animals, it's essential that we also work together to build an inner field of shared human consciousness, of compassion for animals. And so we have created the worldwide prayer circle for animals, where wherever we are, every day at noon, we say together this prayer: compassion encircles the earth for all beings everywhere. Compassion encircles the earth for all beings everywhere. We give thanks knowing this is so, and thank you for being part of this movement to help build a field of compassion for animals.
Thank you, Phil. And compassion encircles this Zoom room as well, for Victoria, whose husband passed away in November, and she's trying to rebuild a positive life. And also sending some supportive CC energy. I like that, Debbie and the Gang of Fur. Supportive CC energy to her neighbor, Debbie Spence, who has endured some poor health as of late and will undergo surgery today. And Roseanne says that today would have been her animal-loving mother's 100th birthday. So happy birthday, Roseanne's mom. And at the same time, holding you, Roseanne, as you have the anniversary of this loss. For all of you who are holding something on your heart that's silent, that has not been put in the chat or has not been uttered, witnessing that too, that sometimes it may not feel comfortable to say out loud, and witnessing what's in your heart. Suzanne offers, may we recognize that even the smallest efforts have impact, that we can stay hopeful. Yes, we need hope. Victoria asks us to offer some prayers here for Linda Long, author of The Great Chef's Cook Vegan, who's in the hospital waiting to hear a prognosis. Christopher just left his childhood farm. His father was a killer of many living things and forced him to take part, and he's no longer there. And this is good. Christopher, welcome. Hope you stick around for fellowship. Beth offers prayers for a musical friend, Richard, who has a serious surgery coming up. And Elena for dear Mika, a beloved family member who let go of her physical presence this past January. Yes, blessings and prayers for Mika as well. Phil, could you bring up our final slide and we'll offer our words together to add to the ones that we just offered. But for those of you who would feel comfortable with this closing prayer blessing we offer every month. May all creatures everywhere be happy and free. May the thoughts, words, and actions of our lives contribute to this happiness and this freedom for all. May it be so. Amen. Amin. So mote it be. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Please feel free to add any closing word that I missed, especially one from those 14 holidays happening around the spring equinox on Wednesday. For those of you celebrating, I hope your celebrations are blessed. William, I believe you have some announcements for us before Victoria invites us all to fellowship.
Yes, we actually have several announcements. Now, am I unmuted? I always get confused. Am I unmuted now?
You're loud and clear.
Okay, all right. So I want to thank all of you for joining us. And so now I'm just going to let you know, we're going to let you know what's upcoming. So while we read these, you have the opportunity to turn on your video cameras if you like. And so now I'm just going to tell you what is upcoming. So our spiritual guest for the Compassion Consortium on April 21 will be Barbara Gardner, who is a founder and the chief executive of the Animal Interfaith Alliance, which is one of the premier worldwide animal rights organizations in the world. And Barbara has been the treasurer and a trustee of the RSPCA and was awarded the Queen Victoria Medal for Long and Meritorious Service for Animal Welfare. So she's been the editor of Catholic Concern for Animals magazine, the ARC, and she edited AIA's magazine Animal Spirit. So Barbara, she's the author of The Compassionate Animal, an interfaith guide to the extended circle of compassion. And the Compassion Consortium is a board member of the AIA. So for April 21, our CIA guest will be Lauren Uram, campaign coordinator for Pro Animal Future. Lauren is the campaign coordinator for Pro Animal Future, a grassroots community working on a society-level evolution away from animal exploitation. And her organization is working on two initiatives right now that appear on Denver's November ballot. One, to ban the sale of new fur products, and another to ban the operation of slaughterhouses in the city. So Lauren studied ecology at CU Boulder and is passionate about helping create a world where nature, humans, and other animals are all accepted and respected. So next, you can register for the next Sunday service at the CompassionConsortium.org Sunday service. And our next event will be on April 9th. Our Compassion Consortium for our engaged member practice will be held on April 9th at 7:30, and Rev Sarah will lead Flora Divina, which is an interspecies practice for sustaining spring in yourself and your habitat. So we'd be very happy if you could join us for that. So on April 24th, the Compassion Consortium will present a delightful special presentation of historical animal welfare and music. Our guests will be animal rights singer-songwriter Bill Van Noter and his wife, noted journalist Elissa Free, and they will join us for an evening of Bill's music and also Elissa's memories of growing up with her mother in the burgeoning animal welfare movement, one of the pioneers, groundbreaking animal welfare journalist, Ann Cotrell Free. So lastly, we have something new, and that is the Compassion Consortium, in conjunction with Vegan Meditation, will offer a weekly online peaceful half hour of vegan-oriented meditation and mindful sharing. And we'll meditate together in silence for 50 minutes, then share brief thoughts on a topic related to compassion, mindfulness, or veganism. And our aim through this practice is to cultivate greater internal peace and presence, and to bring greater mindfulness and compassion to our interactions with the external world and its inhabitants. Dave Simon, who's the chair of the Compassion Consortium Advisory Board, will host each week. So we meet Monday evenings at 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Mountain, 8 CT, and 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And the very first vegan meditation will start on March 25th. And that actually, that is the end of our announcements, correct? Yes, it is.